Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to be here with Megan. She is a soul path astrologer, and we had a very magical meeting. And I'm really just ready to dive into all things astrology with her because she has let me kind of understand my new energies with astrology and reading the charts. And astrology can be very confusing and very broad and very big. She does an excellent job breaking things down and making them super digestible and applying them to our lives. So, thank you for being here, Megan.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for your kind words.
Yes, of course. Okay, just to give you a little bit of a background, because I love how our what is it? What's it called? Like a meet cute, like when you first
Yes,
meet in the story. So
meet
we
cute.
were, yeah, meet cute. And so when Meg and I first had met each other, we were both going to a retreat and we met in the airport and hopped on in a car, a rental car. And for 2 hours, we're driving from Phoenix airport to Sedona, and it was like literally we could not catch up fast enough. Like we've it felt like an instant connection, I felt like, between us. And when you started telling like us, because we were in a car with a really good friend also, Lindsay, which has also been on the podcast, but she was telling me her story, which I would love for you to share parts of it. But we have so many parallels where I'm just like, my jaw was just on the floor. I was like, wait a minute, are we living the same life? So I'd love to kind of get a background of kind of where you started on this journey and just kind of take us back to that moment where we were just trying to catch up of what led you to here.
Yeah, when we met, we were just like, wait, you have the same exact story as me. How is this possible? But yeah, so, we both, at some point lived in New York. I think we were there at the same time and we didn't know each other, obviously. But, you know, and I was just kind of thinking back to this of like how all of this evolved. And, you know, I would say I like say now that my spiritual awakening was in 2021, and that's actually when I left New York, but I kind of started also like back in 2017, 2018, which was when I had my Saturn return, which is something that like people might know that term from kind of the modern pop astrology. A lot of people talk about Saturn returns. And it's kind of this big turning point in your life when you're like between ages 28 and 30. But that was when like some stuff started happening, like some things, I made some decisions that I knew were kind of going against my intuition, and it got me into kind of a big mess essentially that I had to then extricate myself from in 2021. So in 2021, I was working in the fashion industry in New York. I had this fancy job. I had a partner, but it was like my whole life was about work. And all I did, like, I worked nights, I worked weekends. And then literally the only other thing I did was like drink. Like, I would just work and then like get off work and like drink and like go out to fancy restaurants. And like, I had my boyfriend at the time, but like, that was kind of all there was. And kind of when the pandemic happened, it slowed everything way down for me. And I realized that like I didn't really like my job. I didn't really like the people I worked with. I, was really struggling to kind of figure out who I was. I didn't have any hobbies. It was just like I had just bought into this machine of like what I was supposed to be doing. And so in 2021, I made this decision to just like quit my job out of nowhere, which is so unlike me and so just like against my character and what I believed in and all of this stuff. And like I know now that there were transits that were playing into that, you know,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
I don't want
and
to like throw all this lingo in here now, but like that was that was Pluto on my moon that was like causing me to feel these things. But anyway, like quit my job with nothing else lined up. My partner at the time, I was kind of struggling with a little bit, but he was ready to leave New York. And even though like I love New York so much, it was open. And so we put our things in storage. I started traveling with him to see where else we might like to live. And then I ended up like breaking up with him and just like everything. I just sort of like crumbled my whole life. I remember talking on the phone with my sister and being like, Kayla, I think I just blew up my life. Like, and I
oh
just,
my God.
and it was like, I knew that I didn't have a choice, but it was so scary. And
Yeah.
anyway, long story short, led me to where I am today. But, I think it's a big scary thing to kind of leave that world and like that hustle and that programming that we all have of like, you know, for me, it was, I need to climb the corporate ladder. I need to like do and want all of these things. And I just always say it was like somebody told me when I was a kid that like I had to run so hard and fast in this one direction. And I was just like, okay. And I just did that for so long and like broke myself down. Like I was exhausted. I was burned out. And then all of a sudden I was like, why am I doing this? This isn't even what I want.
Mm,
Like, what? This
yeah.
makes no sense.
Yeah, it's like
I know
a
you had like
race.
you had very
Yeah.
like similar experience.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like you're running this race that like you didn't actually know that you signed up for or even really wanted to do, but then you're like super competitive to like finishing the race, which
Yeah.
is a really weird feeling. But yeah, it was literally almost the same timeline. Like I think it was 2018 for me when I started to like question certain things and I kind of stumbled on that Kundalini yoga and I was starting to do different practices and trying to find meaning back in my life. And then it was the same thing living in New York. Yeah, we didn't know, we never ran into each other, I don't think. And
Who
we were
knows?
living in New York at the same time. And I lived the same kind of lifestyle. I worked nights in healthcare, super stressful job. And then any nights that I had off, I'd be out drinking and you know, with the boyfriend at the time too, that wasn't aligned with me. And yeah, I essentially blew everything up too, kind of in that 2020 timeline ish. And yeah, it was like a quick like broke up with the partner, moved out of the city, moved out to Long Island, like changed my job, like all these things. And it's like continuously, I think since that time where I had my own blow up moment, like I feel like more and more layers are shedding even still, which is kind of we're both again at a similar point in life now. So it's really interesting. I think when you kind of reflected that back to me with like astrology and how those, what did you call it, the solar or Saturn return, I was also going through at the time when all that stuff was happening. So you're like, oh, this is maybe why you're feeling these things and this is why this is happening. So having like the perspective of the stars and how that affects us in our life kind of stages is really interesting to actually see the patterns in your own life, how it correlates.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And that
it's
was like, and that was the time period when I found astrology. So, you know, like I had always known about astrology. I remember like I had a friend I was close with in maybe like elementary school and middle school, and we would like read the teen magazines and read the horoscopes. And like I knew I was a Gemini, but I was always kind of like, you know, I wanted it to be true, but I didn't ever feel like it was super true. Like the horoscopes and like the descriptions that I would read about myself. And yeah, but then I literally just went in this time after I like quit my job and like left my partner. I moved back home with my mom in El Paso, Texas, which was like really challenging, really humbling, like just a
Mhm.
weird, weird time. But like during that time, I started just like trying to figure out what I was interested in, what I wanted to be when I grew up, you know, and like started trying all these different hobbies. And I literally just like went to a friend's wedding and one of her friends there into astrology and we all started talking about it and she showed me how to like pull my birth chart and I read some descriptions and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is wild." Because I just thought like I thought all there was to it was like, "Oh, I'm a Gemini and that's it." You know, like and that's 1/12 of the population, just people born within a month. Like I'm obviously not the same as everybody born
Mhm.
in June, like in late May, early June. Like that's stupid, obviously. You know, like
Right.
and so once I started reading into it more, you know, and like, yes, I was in a weird place. I was looking for meaning. I was looking to like make sense of the world. And so the more I dug into it, the more mind blown I was at just like how accurate these things are. And not just like the aspects of my personality, which are part of your birth chart, but like the transits, which are how like the planets keep moving and how they impact us, like kind of in real time as they're interacting with spots on our birth chart or as they're, you know, going through certain things in the sky. Like we all know about full moons, new moons, like that's a transit. It's just got to be really interesting to see like how these things affect us and affect our lived experience. And yeah, like it sort of it gave me peace in some way to kind of see like, oh, okay, this is part of like a larger story. This is part of my evolution. This is like a lesson I needed to learn. And this is something
Mhm.
that's like bringing me closer to where I'm meant to be, which I think is like
Mhm.
what like the gift of astrology is to kind of give you acceptance and understanding and like a zoomed out bigger picture of the things.
Yeah. Just that, I think, okay, yeah, just with you saying that, it definitely feels like, because when we're going through such, I don't know, intense periods of times in our lives, especially when we're in these like turmoil spaces where like we don't know what's up. Like you're in this chaotic moment where you're like, okay, whatever I'm doing, I don't want to do anymore. I don't know what's up from down. Like what direction do I go? What do I like? All these kinds of things when you start to question, it can be so like you're just there and you can't have any perspective. But yeah, I feel like astrology, when you're able to like look at your whole chart as what you provide for people, it's like you're able to just zoom out of the whole picture, which gives you so much perspective of, okay, this little speed bump that I'm going through is actually in the sky and it's for this reason, and these are the perspectives or reasons why, or what the
And
lesson
it's
is, or
temporary.
yes, okay,
It's
yeah.
temporary. Just a eureka moment, I think, for a lot of people is like, it's temporary. It's okay. Like things are gonna be okay. Like things are gonna, and
Yeah.
honestly, like the more you're just like running around ignoring guidance and ignoring your lessons that you're meant to learn, like the harder those transits are. But once you start working with them, then it's an empowerment thing. Like you're coming into an understanding, like, okay, this is why it is, like this is why this is happening. This is what the outcome needs to be. This is how I
Mm.
can change my behavior and just change my perspective and knowing and like like my presence in this moment. It's just, I think that's like the biggest thing with astrology that like people miss.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I want to know what you call the big three is, which, that's kind of like a hype thing now. I think people are getting a little bit more interested in astrology. So you had mentioned you're a Gemini, but what is the big three? What's yours? And how can people find out what their big three is?
So the big three, so we all have a birth chart, right? I'm just going to back up a little bit to answer your
Yeah,
question. So
perfect.
we all have a birth chart. And so a lot of people know their sun sign. So if you know, oh, I'm an Aquarius or oh, I'm a Leo, that's your sun sign. And that is where the sun was in the sky at the moment of your birth. That's pretty easy. But there's also all the other planets and all the other like asteroids and the luminaries, the moon. There's all of these other points. There's mathematical points in the chart. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle of who you are and what your personality is. And so the birth chart is what indicates kind of what our personality is in this lifetime, what we're here to learn, what we're here to, our destiny is essentially in this lifetime, what our karma is, that kind of thing. And so like the most basic, easy place to start is with this big three, which is your sun, which you probably already know, your moon sign, which indicates like your emotional body and how you feel inside, and then your rising sign, which is how you sort of present to the world and how other people perceive you. So if you're talking about like very basic personality, you talk about sun, moon, and rising, so the big three. So like any of this, like this is very, very entry level basic. It's really easy to look up on your own. And this will be like the starting point of any like birth chart reading that you would get from an astrologer. You can pull it on your own. And so I actually have a free download guide on my website to kind of find it. Because sometimes like the website I like to use is astro.com, and it can be a little bit tricky. So I include like the link that'll take you to the exact place you need to go. But you do need your exact birth time, which I feel like is like the one thing that makes astrology like a little bit less accessible than I want it to be, because not everybody knows their birth time. But you do have
I
to.
didn't.
Yeah.
I went because so when I was also looking for meaning, I remember finding astrology, but getting so overwhelmed with how much there is to it. But I knew that it was really helpful to figure out like what my, I guess your north node, like what you're meant to do. I didn't know what my purpose was. And I was like just trying to put pieces together for myself. And when I came across astrology to try to figure this out, I was like, okay, I didn't have I had part of my birth certificate and I had page two of three. And I was like, where's one and three? And so I was like, I had to call my mom, and she was just like, I was like, do you have the rest of my birth, certificate? And she was like, no, you have it. And I was like, I only have page 2. So I had to order mine back from, the hospital I was born in, California. And I had to order my certificate to get my birth time, which is now kind of pointless because now I have a new time, which we could talk about. But yeah, it was challenging for me.
This is a girl after my own heart who will literally like order her birth certificate from the hospital to make sure she gets her birth time. Like that speaks to me so much. But yeah, so like people that don't know their birth time, like most people
Yeah.
walking around in the world just don't just know their birth time off the top of their head. But like, yes, a lot of birth certificates have them. Not all of them have them. And then
Uh-huh.
also there are sometimes some places have like a short form birth certificate and a long form birth certificate. So you would need the longer form sometimes, but
Yeah.
usually it's there. Or your mom. I mean, I get like a little nervous telling people to trust their moms because like your mom might have been on a lot of
Yeah.
drugs. Your mom might have
You're
been in a
in
lot of
birth,
pain.
okay?
There might have been, yeah,
Right.
like
My mom was
your
like,
mom's
"Yeah, I
memory
mean, it
might
was
be off.
thundering." She's like, "Maybe it was the morning." The memory could be off.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, like I would say the last resort is to like ask your mom what she remembers. But like sometimes for me, it was written like in baby books I had. It was like engraved on this like weird picture frame that my mom had of like Megan, born this day at this time, like 6.8 ounces, whatever, like that's how a lot of people find it. But you do need to know that because that is what indicates your rising. Your rising is very, very, very important to be able to like indicate the rest of your chart. And that's the only way you would know like how transits affect you. That's the only way. And I can get into this in a minute, but like to me, horoscopes are kind of like a load of shit.
I love that.
And we can talk about that in a minute, but like in order to interpret like I don't like you have to be really careful talking about predictive astrology because
Mm.
nothing is like set in stone, nothing is predicted. Like I can't say like, "Oh, you're going to get married on this day," or like your member's going to die on that. Like it doesn't work like that, but being able
Mm.
to kind of predict future transits and being able to kind of see the timing of transits, like a lot of that would have to do with knowing your birth time. And the moon could change signs if you have the wrong birth time. So because the moon moves pretty quickly around the chart. So anyway, birth time is
Yeah.
important. I didn't mean to
Gotcha.
go for so long on that, to harp on that so much.
That's okay.
But
I feel like
anyway,
it's necessary.
so you need your birth time to pull the chart. Yeah. It's you'll be able to kind of see on their sun, moon, and rising, but like there's tons of websites on the internet. You can play around and find a site that you like the best. I just happen to like astro.com.
Yeah.
So yeah, but then there's that download on my site, kind of just walk you through exactly how to pull it and how to interpret the sun, moon, and rising. And then, to learn more, I mean, there's all the other planets too. There's Mercury that talks about how your mind works and how your communication style is. There's planets that talk about like your love life and your values or how you assert yourself in the world. Saturn, I'm a very Saturnian person. I've talked about the Saturn return. Saturn's like a big deal. It's about like kind of the hard lessons you have to learn in your life. Jupiter's the planet of luck. Like there's just so much to explore in a birth chart. That's like, to me, it's just fun. It's like at the very least, it's kind of fun to kind of see, okay, do I identify with all of these things? But
Yeah. I feel like when I realized that there was so much to astrology in the chart, and when you like start to look up the specific things about yourself, it realizes like, I don't know, I feel like it's one of the first things, or the first tools that I have found that I had felt really seen of like ways that I communicate or connect or the challenges that I had at certain periods. So it's interesting to, I agree that it's like not predictive because we are living in a state of free will. We can look at a challenge in our chart, maybe, or if you get a reading or something and they're like, okay, this is a challenge or this could happen, we have the ability to be like, yeah, I don't want that to happen. And I'm going to make different choices or decisions or whatnot. So it was something, though, that felt very validating and, yeah, just feeling very seen of like, whoa, more awareness or perspective of even yourself that you can't really always see without someone kind of describing something to you, which is really interesting.
yeah.
But
And I think
yeah.
with with every aspect, with anything that like with anything that's in your chart. So for example, I'm a Gemini. That said, like there's a high road and a low road that you can embody with it. And that's the way my teacher talks about it is like you can say, "Oh, I'm a Gemini sun." Oh, you asked me what my big three was. I never said that, I
Oh
don't
yeah,
think.
right. We just said Gemini. Okay.
So I'm a Gemini sun, I'm a Capricorn moon, and I'm a Cancer rising. So with each of those, or with any placement on anyone's chart, there's an invitation to step into what the highest expression of that is, or you can be
Mm,
like, oh dang, like I kind of embody some of these like lower vibrational frequencies that are associated with this sign. And like we all go back and forth and we all have good days and bad days, but like I think that, the other thing about the chart is like it's an invitation to step into your highest expression and an invitation to, see yourself and accept yourself for what you are, and then also like see and accept other people for what they are and understand them a little bit better too.
that's interesting. Yeah, because I feel like when I don't know, some astrology signs get like the bad raps. So I feel like that is really interesting to note on like a high road and a low road and to explore like we do kind of like the duality of even within us of like the light and the dark and like which ways you'll go. So that's interesting to note because it's like every aspect of the chart has those things that you can say, okay, I'm going to embrace this of myself. What would you say? Okay, so most everybody knows your sun. The rising, how would you describe to someone about what the rising means to your chart?
So this is like a description, like a metaphor that a lot of astrologers use, but I just think it's super helpful. So if you think about a house, we can talk about the sun, moon, and rising in that way. So think about like, say you live in a neighborhood and you always drive by this house, and there's this house that you really love and you just think it looks really pretty on the outside. That's the rising. So you don't really know anything about the house. You don't know how many bedrooms it has. You've never seen the inside. It could be totally dated on the inside. You have no idea. You just like the outside of the house and you have like this first impression that you get from it. That's the rising. It can
Mm,
impact like the way the physical body looks. It can impact like those initial first impressions that people get of you. But it's also, my astrology teacher also talks about it as being like what you're rising into in this lifetime. So there's lessons for you there. There are times when you can feel kind of disconnected from your rising, maybe. Like some people, I think, feel a little more connected to it than others, but it's also like these lessons you're supposed to rise into in this lifetime. Again, the highest expression of what that rising is. Say you then have an opportunity, this house has an open house, and you're like, okay. So then you can go into the house for the first time. You're like, man, I've always liked this house. I've never been in it. So then you go inside the house and you say, okay, it has 3 bedrooms, it has 3 bathrooms. This is what the kitchen looks like. This is whatever. And there's like, you can feel the vibe of the house, right? And so you're like, wow, this house has great vibes. Like, I really like it. I feel this way in here. Like, you can see the features of it a little bit clearly. That's more like your sun. So that's like the sun is like the way you radiate out, like your
mm,
personality, your expression, it's your ego. It's, a lot of people really identify it with it. And the thing is with the sun is that like for me, my sun is in the 12th house, and like the houses is a whole separate thing that we can talk about. And that's again dictated based on like what your birth time is. But the 12th house is the house of like solitude and secrets, and it's hidden. And so like my sun being in the 12th house dims it down a lot. So like when I read about Gemini, I have a lot of those traits, but I don't feel as like bubbly and like super, super, super social and extroverted the way that I always read and understood Gemini to be. And it's because it's in this like certain placement. But anyway, I digress. But
mm.
and the sun also not just like a pure thing always. Like sometimes it is. Like sometimes you have, a sun in Gemini and there's no planets near it. There's no aspects being made to it. It's in a house that it likes to be in. And it's just like this pure literal definition of Gemini. But there's other things that can impact the way that your sun represents. So just like to kind of put that disclaimer out there. And again, like why sometimes people might not identify with their sun sign. So that's the sun is this inside of the house. And this like ego and this like expression of personality is what the sun is. And so then say you buy this house and then you move into this house. And once you move into the house, you get to know it on a more intimate level. Maybe you have to do some construction and you tear down walls. Maybe you start to learn the little like quirks of the house. You're going into the private spaces, the attic and the basement, places that you maybe hadn't seen before. You're really getting to know the house and like mesh with that energy. That's kind of how I describe the moon is like this sort of internal part of you. It's
Oh.
like the emotional side of you. It's the part that's like only comes out with the people you're very close with, the part that like I feel very much like my moon sign because that's the expression that I have every day in this vessel is I'm here with my emotions and my feelings and and that's my moon. And so the people that will know you the closest, maybe your partner, maybe your family, maybe your very, very close friends, will see a lot more of your moon than somebody that like someone you meet on the street won't know anything about your moon. Somebody that, you is kind of an acquaintance probably won't see very much of your moon, but the people that know you the best will see more of your moon. But to me, the moon is really important because it's like my day in and day out is of living in my body is like my moon. So
Mm.
do you feel like
Whoa.
that?
Yeah, that is such a okay, because I'm such a visual person anyways. So like I've never actually heard it described that way. And it makes so much sense in like referring to a house because it is. It's like as you get to go inside and as you get to know it, because I mean, I'm experiencing this right now with like renovating right now, where it's just like now I know the kind of crevices of what it's like to live in the house. And that is when you get closer to someone, you're like, you get those other parts that you don't meet when you just have a couple of meetings. So I really like that visual of understanding, because I still get very confused, or I need a lot of repetition with astrology, because it's not like the language that is makes the most sense to me all the time. So it can
Yeah,
feel really overwhelming, even when
it's a
you're saying
lot.
like the houses and the transits, and I think that's why people get kind of intimidated. And this kind of, I would love for you to segue to like talk about, but a lot of it can feel very overwhelming for people of like, where do I start? And because we grew up reading Cosmo magazine and just learning about the suns and these weird horoscopes that never made sense, or even sometimes CoStar is confusing if people do that app.
I hate
It's
CoStar so much.
I know you do. That's why I brought it up.
It's so negative. It's like
And
everyone's gonna
it,
die today. Like you're gonna have a terrible day. Like it's just like gloom and doom from my
and
perspective. Anyway,
what is with the do's and don'ts? It's like, don't have
they don't make
conversations, don't get deeper. I'm like, what is going on? Like, what
it
this?
doesn't
It's
make
so
any sense to
confusing.
me.
But yeah, it can feel overwhelming for one, and then there's like the stigma around it too that is like, it's just like false, or this, I don't know, just doesn't have actuality or science to it, which back in the day, so long ago, like they would create structures around astrology of the Sirius star. So I think kind of that lost hidden knowledge is kind of starting to come back with people having more understandings and more astrologers coming up, and astrologers especially like you, just also very connected to energy and reading of the chart, but then also the energy of the chart and energy of the person. So you do something very specific that I haven't really seen people do, of taking the chart as a tool for you to also connect to the energy of the person. So like you get a astrology reading, but then you go so much deeper even into the energy of the expression of the person. So talk to me about the stigma, and why do you think people are still so kind of maybe intimidated by it, or why they should get a reading?
So this is a lot to unpack. So I'm gonna start with just
Yeah.
talking about like the stigma around it. So, no, and I get it, but I think that and like let me just start by saying that when I decided to just go ahead and take astrology classes, like I had so much resistance to this too. I was like, this is nonsense. Like, what am I going to do? Become an astrologer? Like, I worked in marketing and like corporate, I'm like, this is stupid. But like,
Yeah.
there was nothing that I was as excited about. And I just feel like it's a really cool lens through which you can view the world. And it's for some people, it's not for everybody. And it's like, with anything, like take what works and leave the rest. But think that I think that there's a lot of stigma around it because of all of the pop astrology out there. And like, don't get me wrong, like I love all of the astrology, like Instagram accounts and everything, just as much as the next person. But I think because been a few things that have caused a lot of astrology to be just kind of inaccurate in like the way that we consume it today. And that's, out of a desire by astrologers to make it very accessible, it like just kind of makes it very generic. And so a lot of times if you read a horoscope, and so when I say horoscope, I'm talking about something that is predictive. So like this is the horoscope for the month of September, and this is what you're going to experience if you're a Gemini. I just think that's like complete bullshit. And the reason for that is because predictions, like I said, are based on your rising sign. So if you have a sun in Gemini, yes, there might be things happening because of the transits that are going through Gemini, but you really need to base it on your rising sign. So anytime that you are seeing I mean, obviously like magazines and newspapers, are those a thing anymore? Not really, but like if you saw like that magazine style or newspaper style horoscope saying like, this is what we're predicting for your upcoming day, week, month, year, whatever, you should be reading that based on your rising sign. And the reason astrologers don't share that is because a lot of people don't know their rising sign. So right off the bat, you're losing people. Like you
Okay.
should never be, in my opinion, you should never be reading like, oh, this is what's to look at for the month ahead. You should never be reading that based on your sun sign, because there
Hmm.
could be aspects of it that are accurate depending on where your sun is and what the transit is. But in reality, you're going to want to be reading it for your rising sign because it's going to indicate what house the planets are moving through. And that's like kind of hard to explain, but just trust me on this. Like, you need your rising to be able to like do the horoscope thing. And so that's in my opinion. So then when people read that, A, they have to make it really generic, and B, in my opinion, it's just wrong to read it based on your sun sign. And so
Yeah.
people read it and they're like, this is generic, this isn't helpful, and then like those things don't happen. So I just think you're
Mm,
losing a bunch of people right off the bat. And then the other
yeah.
thing that I think happens is that people think it's all just about your sun sign. So again, like me being like, oh, I'm a Gemini, I really think like my best friend was born the day after me. Are we the exact same person? Obviously not. Like there's so much more to it than just the sun sign. And so I think having all this focus and people being like, oh, I don't identify with my sun sign or like whatever. That's like, we're complex people. We're multifaceted, multi-dimensional people. And that's what a chart is. The chart has, okay, well, not only do you have a sun, but the sun's in the 12th house. Not only do you have that, but it's conjunct, it's right next to Venus and Mercury and Chiron, and it's right on the ascendant, and it's, opposing Saturn. Like, this is aspects of my chart. Like, there's a lot that plays into just the definition of what my sun is. And then there's all these other planets and asteroids that play into it too. And then there's all of the transits, which is the real-time movement of the planet. So it's very complex. Yes, that can be intimidating, but also that's what makes like a lot of that easy digestible stuff you see on Instagram. It just makes it like kind of too
Mm,
simplistic and not accurate and too generalized. And that's why people are like,
yeah.
this is crap. This is bullshit,
Yeah.
Because it
The
kind
word
of is.
that Yeah, the word that comes up when you're describing all of this to comparing like things to what when we're trying to understand it for ourselves in this way is like just diluting it, like diluting the power of what it actually provides or how much information is packed into your chart at any given time of like what you're saying your transits. So, yeah, it's a shame because you're like, "Oh, well that doesn't make sense to me because I'm not this." And I had that experience is my mom's a Capricorn. I was born a Capricorn, and I just saw ourselves as like such vastly different people, and I was like almost like I don't think I had that same kind of feeling. I was just like I don't know if I'm a Capricorn or like because I didn't know that you had so much more to the chart. So it's interesting when you look at people around you that's the same sun sign. Like that makes so much sense where it's just like just because you have something in common with the chart has nothing to do with, you have so much more information that's like packed in there, which is really trippy. But
And like,
mm,
and the rest of it, like, I would never pretend to understand how all of this works. Like, people have been using astrology for millions of years. Like, it goes back, I think I read like 2000 BC, and it's like all of these ancient civilizations sort of independently discovered and were working with astrology in some way. And like you were saying, like these old, like
mhm.
crazy wonders of the world, like these amazing structures that we don't know how they did, like are built in ways to align with like full moons, new moons, eclipses, solstices. Like they were paying attention to the sky. And
Yeah.
like they could tell that what was happening in the sky was influencing what was happening in the land. So the harvest, the seasons, the tides are all impacted by like these things that they're seeing in the sky, these things that we still see in the sky. Like as women, like our cycles are tied to the moon. Like it's just, you can't deny these things. You can't deny that the sun and moon rule our worlds. We wouldn't be able to survive without the sun and the moon. And so it's just, we know
Mm,
that there's that little piece. And then think about how much infinitely bigger, these other planets are than the moon. And so it's like, I don't know why it works. I don't know why what's happening, millions of light years away is impacting what's happening in my day here on Earth. I don't know, but it's like, again, I
mm,
think it's a way of reading, like you were saying, a way of reading the energy of a day, of a time period in your life. You can read the energy of a relationship. You can read the energy of a place that you visit, all kind of traced back to the stars. And
yeah.
pretend I
There's
understand it, but I see it. The reason that I got into this, I'm such like a logical type A person, but when I see how accurate it is in my own life, I'm just like blown away by it. And again, it gives me permission to be who I am. It gives me the comfort and understanding what the bigger picture is. And in the clients I've worked with, it gives them the tools to lead a more aligned life. And so,
mm,
is it that different? I just don't think it's that different from believing, from anyone outside of like a complete atheist who believes in nothing. Like all belief in some way is kind of a leap of faith and a leap looking towards something that we don't understand to make sense of our world on Earth. And so that's kind of, I think, what astrology is as a filter. So,
And it's interesting too, because like going back to your original, like kind of part of your story when you had moved out of New York and you were having this break with your mom and really just like exploring yourself and exploring hobbies and this kind of stuff. I remember you saying that you're like, I didn't believe in anything. Like you weren't a spiritual person, you did all the mainstream stuff, you're climbing all that corporate ladder, all that kind of stuff. And then now for you to like flip a 180 and now just like dive into astrology and stuff is really interesting, and how much, I think it says a lot of how much it actually impacted you, especially when you're saying, I'm a very logical person. You're very, let's make sense of what's going on. And it is such a science. And yeah, it's just kind of to go from there to now where you're at now. I don't just I love to like just like, go into more of what you think, why people think that they do the things that they should do, and how people can kind of make that jump or risk or switch that you had done. Like, what do you feel like was your biggest tools or ways that you decided to just do those things? Was there any kind of like process, or you're just like, I'm so done with this and this is what I'm doing now? Like, how did that look?
yeah. I mean, it's funny because, yeah, you're talking about like, I didn't believe any of this stuff. I was like a complete atheist. I was like
Yeah.
hardcore, like, there's nothing out there. Like, all of these religious people are out of their minds. Like, just hard atheist until 2021. And I literally had a psilocybin trip that
Mm.
completely changed everything. And I just had this moment of knowing that I was part of something bigger and that I was whole and
Mm.
pure just as I am, that I'm worthy, that I am of source, part of source. I am source, but I'm also nothing. It was just like this very profound experience that I had. And like, I wasn't trying to have a spiritual experience, I was just taking drugs, and, and like, I decided to move out of New York like shortly thereafter. And like, would I have done that if it weren't for this like one experience I had? I don't know. But I think there was something about that experience that connected with me, with this piece of me that knew that there was something more, that knew that it was good enough, I guess, to
Mm.
be and to trust myself and to do kind of what I came here to do. And so my beliefs about all of that have evolved over time and have been the product of lots of other experiences I had. And like, that's the thing about any kind of belief. It's, you can understand anything on a logical level. And like, yes, you can't make sense of something like the Bible logically. You can't make sense of something like astrology logically. You can't make sense of any of these beliefs logically. But when you have an experience, like, that's the only thing that can prove those things to you. And that's why people have faith in these kinds of things. And so, sort of trusting myself was very hard for a long time. So when we talk about like this very 3D world that we were both living in, of like working really hard and just trying to achieve whatever everybody else told us we were supposed to, I think that breaks down to not trusting yourself, right? It's like, I don't know what I should be doing, so I'm just going to listen to whatever everybody else says that I should be doing.
Mm.
I should really study in school and like work hard and get good grades. I should like go get a really good job and like work my ass off. I should date somebody and get married and have lots of babies and buy a house and like whatever. And it's like, yeah, some people want that, and that's great if you want that. But like, also,
Mm.
did someone just tell you should want that? And I think like all of what like the spirituality has amounted to for me has just really come back to like trusting myself, trusting my intuition, trusting my guidance, connecting with myself, because it's very easy to just like use this vessel as like a car, and you're just like, okay, just like put it on autopilot, and like, I'm going to just go through the motions. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to wake up, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to come home, I'm going to eat dinner, I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to do it again, like, and it's easy to get stuck in that like rat race thing. But like, if you listen to your body, if you listen to your intuition, what is it that you really want to do, and what are you here to do? It's really scary to follow that guidance at first, but like, my understanding, and this is just my understanding and my belief, and this comes through the astrology and this comes through all the other things I've done, but I believe that we're all here with a mission. I believe that we have karma to work through and lessons to learn in this life. And I believe that our souls chose to be here. Our souls, are these infinite things that like we're here for this lifetime on this planet, and we're lucky to be here, that this is this beautiful, beautiful place with just the most amazing, like beautiful, beautiful nature, and like this capacity. We have this capacity for like the deepest love, and there's also unspeakable cruelty and heartbreak and trauma that can happen here, but like the highest joys also, and this whole range of human emotions and these various things. Like I could do anything right now. I could go travel to India and decide to become like whatever, a yoga teacher. I could decide I wanted to like be a free diver. I could decide, like, we have all of these options. There's nothing stopping you from doing all these weird things. You could do whatever you wanted to do. But like we all stick into this little mold of like, oh, I'm supposed to be like a good girl, and I'm supposed to do this, and I'm supposed to like fall in line. And I just think that's broken. I think that's like a program, And so kind of am losing the lead of what the question was a little bit, but it's like,
No.
how you break out of that. I mean, it takes courage.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think astrology has kind of shown me that there is a bigger picture, and that like we're here on this planet to enjoy it and to try things and to work through our shit and to like make the world a better place. And so, in my old job, I was literally making the world a worse place, I was selling a product I didn't believe in. I was like, there's environmental issues in the fashion industry. I was working with these like terrible people. Like I know I'm here to help people. And so, and like, yeah, I just think it takes courage and bravery to break out of all of that and move toward like to take risks and to do what you want to do, to listen to yourself and to like live in alignment with your mission.
Yeah. I definitely think it's a program. I also have that belief. I also have had like my own personal experiences similar to you where you have these moments of synchronicity or powerful like visceral experiences of like there's something more here going on that I can't even mentally logically understand, but you feel it so deeply within your being. It's like your soul has the resonant, you have the inner knowing of like, wait a minute, and it's something does pop you awake. And I think more people are starting to kind of go on that path or have that happen to them in these different chunks of years, as like I think our collective embodiment of earth, of humans right now, are just kind of like gradually on this rise. But I think even for me, I love the way that you said that, taking risks and knowing that you can do anything that you actually want to do and try. And there's so much here to do or to try. And I think that, I think we're very beings of seeing what is possible and being like, oh, okay, I can do that too if I see that being done. So, in my experience, I didn't see the life that I had wanted around me. I didn't have any examples of the life that I wanted. I was really confused about not wanting the things that I saw around me. And I kind of did the same thing. I just chose to kind of go along that path and not realizing that you can create your own path and you can make these different decisions. And it took me also unwinding that within my own journey, where it's like more people are able to be like, wait a minute, I can actually start my journey from the get-go of doing my own path and making these explorations. And we just sometimes I feel like we're creatures of habit, where we're just doing the same things and we forget that we actually have the autonomy to be like, wait, I could do anything with my life. Like you said, I could just go travel to India right now, or I could just pick up and move if I decide to. And I think it's easy for us to keep ourselves into the boxes that we are comfortable in, especially if we see so many other people in the same boxes. So when we surround ourselves with people that are also taking these risks and making these different decisions and exploring themselves, I think that gives us even more permission to do that for ourselves, which I love our relationship, because I continuously feel like we are able to push each other in ways of continuing to take those risks and go out into those boxes. And why conversations like this is so important, to speak about our journeys and listen to other people's journeys, to be like, oh, okay, if someone was so dead, and I forget the word that you had said, which I had also felt in my job of just, yeah, I just almost dead inside of what you're doing. You're like, oh, actually, life doesn't have to feel like that. Like, I don't have to do a job that I hate every day, and I don't have to live the way that my life is, and I don't have to do these things. Takes a lot of pressure off of yourself to be like, oh, I can make these different changes. It puts the power back into yourself, even when you're looking at your birth chart of like, whoa, I came in with these challenges to go through for my own soul growth. And then I can look at these challenges and see how I get to learn from them and grow my soul. So, but with you speaking about travel, I kind of want to circle into, because we are such travel addicts and we both love travel, and I have been specifically called to certain places super strongly. And I know you have too. So I'd love for you to talk about the how that plays out into our chart and maybe why we are called to certain places in our chart to go travel to.
Yeah. So that's something that I'm just like obsessed with right now, is figuring out kind of this locational astrology piece. So, being a Gemini, I am just like endlessly curious, always going to consider myself a student. So like, I'm definitely not an expert on this yet, but I'm learning about it in real time. So I've been living nomadically I just hit my 1 year anniversary of living nomadically. So I've been traveling all over the world. I know you have a time in your life where you were traveling so much, and you still travel a lot, but like, there is something to be said about the way that geography impacts your chart. So if you are here and you look at the sky tonight and you see the stars and whatever, if you went then to Patagonia and looked up at the same sky, the stars would be in a different placement. Things kind of go below the horizon at different times of the year. And so that's, again, where the rising is important. That's like the sun sign. Everything works in cycles in astrology, right? And on our planet, everything comes in cycles. And so your place on Earth is going to interact with the heavens in a slightly different way. And so branch of locational astrology just kind of takes your little birth chart and tweaks it slightly for the longitude and latitude of where you are. So for me, I was born in El Paso, Texas. My birth chart is based on El Paso, Texas. But then when I travel to Europe, for example, the chart sort of twists a little bit. So the rising sign moves, and therefore all of the houses move, and the different aspects, the different interactions between the planets and the angles might move a little bit as well. And so I've just been kind of, some astrologers believe that this is a big deal. Other astrologers don't believe it's as big of a deal. So I wanted to kind of see for myself. So as I've been traveling, I have been, seeing what the experience feels like in a certain place and journaling about that, and obviously living it and just being really present in whatever the experiences are I'm having in a place. And then when I leave and move on to the next place, I pull the chart and take a look at it and dive in all excitedly to see like how it lined up with my lived experience. And it's just really interesting. And I think our souls are called to different places so that we can learn different lessons, have different experiences, and grow in different ways. And, I think there's other aspects besides astrology that pull us to places. If there's people we're supposed to meet, contracts we're supposed to, come into, healing we're supposed to do, grid work, those kinds of things. Like, I think those things call us to places as well. And that may or may not be impact. I mean, I think that would still be, sort of indicated in the chart, but really wild. It's like, if you've really, really, really hated a place for no apparent reason, like the vibes aren't there, you just don't like it, you don't feel like yourself, or you move somewhere and you're like, God, like, I just have a really hard time dating here. I have a really hard time with my job here. Like, that could be based on that relocated chart for that place. And so for me, I have like a little bit of a challenging birth chart where I have, again, Saturn. Saturn's kind of I love Saturn. I'm very Saturnian, but Saturn can be like a little bit of a difficult, it's like the planet of restriction, the planet of discipline and responsibility and hard lessons. And like, in my hometown, that Saturn is very prevalent. I kid you not, when I fly out of El Paso, like in the air, on the airplane, it's like, oh, like as soon as I get far enough away, the chart changes a little bit. And it's like this heaviness on my shoulders, this burden, this responsibility, like kind of comes off. And it feels a little bit lighter as I just move a little bit away from that angle, because Saturn's on an angle when I'm in my hometown. And so there's something really interesting about that. I can feel it. And
Wow.
some people, some astrologers say you need to like stay in a place for a certain amount of time before you can feel it. I have definitely noticed it on my trips. And yeah, you could choose to move or travel to a certain place if you wanted to have better luck in whatever it
Mm,
is in your career. If
different
you wanted to like
experience. Yeah.
write a book, you could move to a Mercury line. If you wanted to find love, you could move to like Jupiter line or a moon line or a Venus line. It's like, and it just kind of explains why, like, in some places it feels like you're just like bumping your head into a wall over and over again, and that's kind of how I feel in El Paso. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it's like really, I'm learning again about it in real time, how it actually
Right.
works in
As
my
you're traveling. And
experience.
I love that, like, you have the experience, you see how you feel, you take note of all those things, and then you go back and look at it. Cause then sometimes, I mean, obviously we can look at something and then have it almost feel like you lean into that energy even more because you know that's what's about. So it's cool that you're like after the fact saying, okay, how did my experience compare with like what the actual chart was?
Try
So
not
that's
to
really
make
wild.
myself biased or like
R-
give myself like the
Right.
sort of vibes going into it.
Right.
And like a lot of the places I've traveled have been like not great charts, but like good thing, and then it's also impacted by transit. So like New York, for example, is a really good place for me to live. And I lived there for 6 years. But while I was there, I had my Saturn return. I had my, Pluto on my moon. Like I had these transits that like those are going to happen no matter where in the world. Like you can't run away from those, obviously.
Mm,
But it just, I mean, it's
mm.
a thing. I'm a believer now in this.
Yeah. Okay, wait. I remember you saying something where for your birthday, you can decide to want to lean into the next year of what you want the energy to be, that wherever you spend your birthday, it can kind of help impact the energy of your next upcoming year. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So this is like another fun experiment that I love to do. So some astrologers believe this is a thing, other ones don't. And so I wanted to see for myself. And so this is the solar return. So I do solar returns for clients as it's like so I always recommend starting with, I'm going to take a step back again. I always recommend starting with a birth chart reading if you haven't had it
Hmm.
before, just to kind of get to know yourself. But like, it's always really fun to do a solar return reading, which shows you what the themes are going to be for a year. So, like I said, everything in astrology is cyclical. You have your sun in a certain place, and then obviously, we know that it takes a year for the sun to go around. So the sun returns to that same place it was when you were born. We take a snapshot of the chart of where all the other planets are, and that shows you kind of the themes that you'll be experiencing in that year. So we all know some years are harder than others. Some years are great and like easy breezy and everything goes great. And then other years are like kind of difficult. And that can be kind of traced back to the solar return chart. And that's just a layer, a level that we add on top of the birth chart. The birth chart is always going to be yours, but things like the locational astrology that we were just talking about, things like the solar return chart, are kind of other filters that we can kind of put on top to kind of see what the influences are at play in your life at any given time. But anyway, the solar return chart, some astrologers base it on just always your birth, your hometown of where you were born. But other astrologers believe that it's based on where you physically are the time when the sun returns to that position. So where you are on your birthday. I know that like I've really experienced locational astrology in action when I travel. So definitely experience it also with the solar return chart. And so again, this is just an experiment. I just wanted to know for myself. So 2 birthdays ago, I sat down and I looked at what the options were of where I would be able to travel on my birthday. And again, where you are just sort of shifts the chart. So it shifts where the chart begins, so where that rising is, which impacts the way that the houses go. So I shifted my chart purposely. I decided to go to Chicago for my birthday. That gave me a chart that was about like, okay, so I don't have much Sagittarius in my chart. Sagittarius is my favorite sign. I'm a little biased because like I just think it's like this very free-spirited, fun-loving, loves to like have big philosophical ideas and conversations, but loves travel. And travel is very important to me. So I chose a Sagittarius rising for myself. And I chose a chart that like was based on travel and love. And then that was exactly what happened that year. And it was amazing. And it's like choose your own adventure. Like who wouldn't want that, you know? And I was just blown away, you know? And was it a self-fulfilling prophecy? Maybe, but like It was worth it. I was really liking that chart. It was a lot better than the chart I was going to have if I had spent my birthday in El Paso or wherever else. So I did look at a lot of different cities. And so you do have to kind of like, it can't just be like, oh, I'm going to go like an hour away. That doesn't change the chart enough. You have to kind of go a little bit farther.
Mm.
But so that was my chart. And then this year, I went to Boston for my birthday. And I, of course, like specifically chose what chart I wanted. So we'll see if this, I mean, so far this year has me, so it's an Aries rising. So it's also like fire. I don't have a lot of fire in my natal chart. So it's a little more of this like fire starter, go-getter, assertive, like bold leadership energy. So definitely feel that. And there's like some other placements there too. So I'm a big believer in that. And so that's something that, fun to
Yeah.
play with and
Yeah,
really,
and
really
I think and even too where it's like we feel okay, so if you have a chart and if you have these different tools to like learn about yourself, then you think like that's all that I am and I can't be these other aspects. But it's really cool to play with. You're like, okay, we all have these aspects in different varying degrees or whatever, or intensities. So intentionally going to a place to bring more of that into your chart, into your experience, helps you kind of say, and yeah, it could it be a placebo effect? We know that actually really works. Like the intention and what you want to bring into the world and your focus and having that is powerful in itself. So like you actually taking the steps and looking at the charts and saying, this is what I want to imprint onto the next year. All of that has like power in itself, even if you don't look at the astrology chart, I think. But even being there differently locationally helps you be like, okay, how can I draw more of the things that I wish to embody? And it kind of helps like solidify that energy in with the location. So I had never heard about that before of where you spend your birthday and how that affects how your year has gone. So I'm really excited to play with those kinds of things because
yeah.
I've really only experienced what it's like to like have the natal chart reading. I think at one point with one relationship, I had that dual reading where you look at how your chart interacts with you two together. And
Mystery.
that's kind of the synastry, which I know that you offer these different, can you just review a little bit of like your offerings of what you can provide for people and like what would you start with if you haven't had reading before?
So definitely start with a birth chart reading. If know you at all and you've never had an astrology reading and you go straight for one of these others, I'm probably going to try and talk you out of that because I think the birth chart reading is a really good foundation for really understanding the bigger picture of like who you are, what you came here to do, what your lessons are, all of those things. That's like a really good, and we'll
Yeah.
go over transits in that reading. So we'll talk about elements, which is another really important thing that we haven't chatted about, but like we'll talk about what's going on, what your birth chart is. And then we'll also talk about like what transits are impacting you now and kind of about invitations of how you can sort of harness the energy that you're given, the gifts that you're given, and step into the best version of yourself, both like today and always. So I definitely recommend starting with a birth chart reading. But then from there, it like can kind of go wherever. There's the solar return readings, like I was just talking about. Those are great to kind of they're great as like a birthday gift for somebody else or for yourself to kind of look at year by year like what the themes are going to be. If you booked that in advance, we could also look at like where the best place would be for you to experience your birthday. And then we do synastry. So I do synastry readings, which is where you lay two charts on top of each other and kind of see how they interact. So that could be for a business partner. It could be for a family member. Obviously, the most popular is like a romantic relationship. I just think it's really, really cool to be able to see like, because we can feel it. Like you can feel when you're really drawn to somebody. You can feel when there's like some sort of like karmic connection to somebody. And that's always just there so literally in the charts. I was just looking at
Mm.
Stormy's chart and my chart the other day and I was like, oh my God. There's a reason why we were so drawn to each other in the Phoenix airport and whatever. But like we have like a karmic connection. But like, that synastry chart is what kind of reveals all of that. And that reading will go through a little bit like of your personality. So like if you know a lot about astrology, your partner's maybe not as into it, like they don't necessarily need a birth chart reading before we do it, because I will kind of go over like sun, moon, and rising briefly before diving into the synastry chart. But that's like a really fun, cool one to do. And it's again, like I'm really focused on the positive. I'm not going to like come in here and be like, you're doomed, you should break up. Like that's not the vibe, right? It's like, you're kind of seeing what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, what you guys bring out in each other, like what you're here to learn and do together. So that's the synastry chart. And then I do the locational astrology chart. So looking at where you're living. So maybe you've moved away from your hometown and you're living somewhere and you want to kind of understand like what the lessons and challenges are of where you're living, or you're considering a move, or you're deciding like where you want to get married, or what, like where you want to, whatever, where you want to travel. Locational astrology, again, is like near and dear to my heart. So with the nomadic living, it's just been something that I've really been able to play with and like learn a lot more about recently. So we can dive into that as well.
Mm.
And yeah, there's going to be more offerings definitely soon. Stormy's kind of working with me on some of those ideas that I have, being my guinea pig. So yeah, and I'm always like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just a sucker. Like I just am so into astrology and like learning more about everything. So you never know like kind of what the future offerings might be.
Yeah. And I think just from like my personal experience with you is, I have a very interesting, I guess you could say, kind of story with my birth chart and trying to see, how to better understand myself. And, I have my original birth chart where I was born as Erica, and then I have a new natal birth chart, which is the energy of Stormy. And you've been able to give such an interesting perspective of like reading both of those charts on how they merged, like how, and you can explain this better than I can, but like how one kind of merged into the other of, how Erica's foundation then was actually everything that was maybe lacking in that chart or difficult, then like kind of Stormy came in and kind of almost in that synergy kind of reading of being able to say, oh, this is what's helping you kind of go into this energy. So I remember, we were sitting on the couch. We were traveling in Mexico City together, and I just was really having a hard time grasping these two things and grasping like I have this new energy birthday and not even knowing what to do with this information and not even knowing like who is a Taurus, like what does it mean to be a Pisces moon, like all this stuff was just so different than what I had originally learned about astrology. And so you were diving in, I remember you were diving into like both of my charts so heavily of like, oh my God, this connects to this. And then it's so exciting to see how like passionate and just detailed oriented you are and how deep that you go into these charts and what you're able to provide for me. And I literally was able to like see and understand kind of how to anchor in more of that energy for myself and how to kind of, okay, we can fully step into and embody both of these charts, but now we can take on Stormy's chart and just really live this embodiment. And so that was my experience with your astrology, but it's
Well, and
just,
like I've never, like never have I ever read someone's chart of like, this is who I was. And then I had, I don't know how, I don't want to put words in your mouth of what happened exactly, but like, then essentially I got this new chart and it's like, I've literally never read the chart of a baby because like you were essentially like just born. And
right.
but I was able to see like the threads of like, okay, like Erica came here to learn this and this, because like in any chart, you can see what the karma is. You can see what you're here to learn. You can see what you're here to master and what you've already mastered. It's just really cool to see like the evolution from Erica into Stormy. And then like knowing that now as Stormy, you haven't lost like the lessons
Hmm.
and the learnings of Erica. They're all just sort of like there in the chart of Stormy too. You can see like what the
Hmm.
evolution is. And again, like I believe that these astrology charts are like a snapshot, like a cheat sheet essentially of like this lifetime. And so like with these two different entities that you've been, like you don't lose Erica. Erica just sort of got integrated into the second chart as well. And it was just wild to see that. Like you can't make
Yeah.
this shit up. And that's like that's what I say. Like I find myself saying that like every day with the astrology. It's like you can't make this shit up. Like I couldn't make this up if I tried. It's just like it's so wild.
Yeah, it's so true. Oh, it's so true. And so, yeah, I remember that just that reading being so powerful for me to just, yeah, it's a weird situation. And so, it's just like to have that newer understanding, I guess, of this, yeah, newer understanding of myself. And to any situation, maybe when you're listening of like, am I a weird situation? Just know that Megan can handle it. She knows what to do with your child. But yeah, so okay, I kind of want to end our chat more with kind of more of your thoughts on how you're balancing the unknown and taking big leaps and really trusting, because you had mentioned that earlier in this episode of our conversation. And I know you're in this another transition right now, currently. So yeah, I just want you to kind of chat about that and how we can really start to come into the energy of what we're here to do. And it's scary doing these big risks and doing something different and making these different decisions based on what we have done or what we see people do and doing the opposite. It's really scary to do. So you do it really well and you're doing it again. So let me.
Yeah. So it's been a whirlwind since I left that job in 2021, and I have done all kinds of different things. So the way that I travel is by pet sitting. So I go and stay in people's homes and like watch their homes and their pets like while they're traveling. I was a Pure Bar instructor. I was writing a dating column. I like did all these different things. I was a matchmaker. And then like I have gone back a little bit to my marketing roots and have been working back in the marketing space, kind of consulting a little bit, but I did end up going back in-house for one of my old companies. And it was a company that I really believe in and really care about the people. So it was an integrity, which is important for me. But I did just get laid off for the first time in my life. And the thing is like, you can look at that as a victim and be like, why me? This isn't fair. This is terrible. I'm not good enough. Like all of these stories that are very, very easy. They're right there. I could just grasp onto any one of those. And trust me, I walk that balance daily basis of like, am I going to lean that way into the victim mentality or am I going to like lean the other way? I mean, for me personally, I have, again, Saturn, like maybe we need to do another podcast just about Saturn, but I have Saturn
Literally.
going over literally like it's
There's so
so
much.
literal.
This will be
It's
like
so
the big
literal.
three foundational astrology episode, and then we'll dive deeper
Yeah.
into stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like I can look at my chart and I can say, okay, I know Saturn is literally going over my point of career. So it's hard lessons and discipline and trying to align you. And like, I always think of Saturn as like, it's the one that's coming here and like sitting there like this and being like, are you pretending that you don't know? It's like, what are you pretending you don't know? Like, you know, but you're pretending you don't know. Like,
Mm.
that's what Saturn is. It's like, where are you just like fucking around and just like, la la la, like, I'm just going to ignore like all of this signs, all of these guidance, all of like the things that I know I should be doing. That's what Saturn comes to like kick your ass when like you're doing that. And so I was working back in the fashion industry, back for this old company of mine, and like this layoff came. And so Saturn's going over my midheaven, which is my career point, and my north node, which is my destiny. So Saturn's
Oh
coming
my
along to
God.
be like, are you on track? Are you in alignment? Oh, this part isn't in alignment, so I'm going to rip this out from under you. And so, like, yeah, again, it's hard, but I know that it's a redirect that's here for a reason. And so I'm going to take that and I'm going to know that, like, okay, I know this is like the last little piece that was not aligned. And so it's time to move forward. And so it's time to really put all of my energy into being an entrepreneur and into my mission of being here to help people and heal people. And it is what it is. Like, it doesn't matter how many objections I have to that, how many like little trauma things that I have to work through to kind of accept that. Like, I know that that's like what I'm learning here. And so, yeah, it can be scary, but like I said, we're here on this planet, we can do all of the things. And I just want to step back and say, I didn't mean to sound cavalier about like, oh, you could just move to India. Like, I'm not oblivious to the fact that like I'm a privileged person to be able to say that. I'm white. Like I've always had money, but there's like ways that things happen. Like, so right now I'm pretty, like I've lost my source of income. The way that I travel is through this platform that allows me to stay for free in other people's homes. So I haven't paid rent in a couple of years. Like, there's things that you can do and workarounds that come. And for me, the guidance comes. The more clear I am, the more connected I am to myself, the more clear I am on what my mission is, the more I listen to my intuition, listen to my guidance, listen to those little nudges, the more things just kind of come out of nowhere. Like, I don't think I used to be a big manifestation girly, but like the way that it has changed my life over the last like year or two has been really profound. And I think that like support comes when you need it if you're in alignment, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's scary, but it's also amazing. You know, like you can do so many things for free. You can do so many things cheaply. Nowadays, anybody can learn anything. Internet, you know, you can connect with people all over the world. You can, I mean, I've been lucky to have mentors who have made, you know, made things very affordable or free for me. Like there's just a lot of resources out there to help you. And I think the universe kind of stands behind you when you're trying to, when you like get your shit
Yeah.
together and you're actually working towards what you're supposed to be working towards. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I mean, it does take
Yeah.
courage and it does
Yeah.
take bravery, and I'm still figuring it out. Like I'm going to be figuring it out. It's not like, oh, I did all this work on myself and now I have it figured out. Like that's just not how life is. We're here to continue to learn and evolve over time. And it's about the journey. Obviously, like that's an annoying thing to say, but it's true. It's like about the journey. And there's not going to be like one day where you're like, I have arrived and it's all done, you know?
This is the end. That's like, and even
Yeah.
the end isn't even in death. Like the soul keeps going. So it's like just,
Yeah.
yeah, a continuous quest and journey. You definitely answered the question. I think it's really refreshing to kind of to talk about that, where it's like you feel like, you know, when you kind of start this kind of path to like really listen and tune in and yeah, listen to the guidance that you're given either by your own gut intuition, by the universe. I think all of it's so connected. It's like kind of I think it's almost all the same. And so when you start to like take those, okay, I'm going to trust this, I'm nudged to this, I'm going to go here, I'm going to talk to that person. And definitely the more that you start to do that, the more it just continues to show up for you because you're like, oh, like she's listening, she's, you know, going where she's guided, or she's doing the things that you know, the soul is like, she's following the path, the yellow brick road kind of thing. I feel like sometimes I'm on, and it's always really,
And you're collecting little nuggets as you go, like
yes,
little learnings, little nuggets, little skills, meeting people. Like yeah,
yeah,
it's the yellow brick road
yeah.
for sure.
And I do feel like you get to certain destinations on this path of like, oh, all of those things, like all of the trials, like all these struggles, all of these kind of tools that I learned along the way, like all of these like make sense right now. And then this is kind of, it's forming this little spot where it's just like, okay, this is either how I could help people, where I'm going to go next, like where I'm going to move. This is, and then I feel like you go, so like it's like a little checkpoint I feel like you're on. And then you kind of go on to the next and you collect more things and you talk to more people. And it's kind of just makes me feel like it's not always this huge thing that you're always constantly trying to do. I think the more that you do it, then the more easier and clear things get along your path. Cause then, yeah, like you said, you're then in alignment, you're kind of more on that soul path of what you're doing, what you're here to do, and it starts to become not easier. It just feels, sometimes it feels easier in ways where it's like, oh, that really fell together when you start trusting those things. And it's, yeah, the advice sounds very fluffy, but it's way harder to do than it is to say. And you just have to experience it. You just have to do it and start to trust and listen to that aspect. And like you said previously, like until you have that actual experience for yourself. And once you do, then you're just like, oh, that makes sense. Like that's what everybody's
Yeah.
talking about, like this feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
And
But
yeah, and it doesn't have to be, I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, like you can call it whatever you want to call it. I think a lot of us are
yeah,
able to connect with whatever this higher power is. Maybe for you, that's something different than what it is for me. Maybe for you, astrology isn't it, it's something else. But like, again, it's a
yeah,
framework for how to view the world. And it's a way that like you can have this experience that validates, you know, if you listen, the universe is here nudging you and giving you signs. You just have to like slow down, trust yourself, and listen to it. And when you do, honestly, like the experience is just like they'll blow your mind. Like they'll blow your mind over
yeah.
and over and over again. The more I listen, the more rewarded I am. And I just feel so supported. And it's like it's
Mm.
something that I can never explain. I could never convince somebody else of. You kind of have to experience it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So good. Okay, so I will put all the links for you to contact and get a hold of Megan. She is on Instagram under Metamorphosis Astrology. And please download her free download. It's where you can find out how to find your big three, your sun, moon, and rising. And that is your foundation starting point of astrology to better understand yourself. And then she has loads of those juicy offers that she just described on where to get started. If you're in a new relationship, in a marriage, want to travel somewhere, there is an astrology chart for it all. So, yeah, any finishing notes that you feel like you want to share with us, or does that feel complete on our chat?
Just say that, like, if you feel like you are living your life for somebody else, I would just invite you to tune in and see if there are little changes you can make. You don't have to quit your job and move across the country. You don't have to live nomadically, but maybe there's a relationship that's not aligned. Maybe there's, a different way you want to be treating your body. Like, there's, you can find just the courage and start with little small steps to get you a little bit closer to where you're meant to be. And I just
Mm.
invite you to kind of break out of that autopilot mode, because I think the rewards will be just so, so good, so, so juicy.
Yeah,
So I just wanted
out
to
of
encourage that.
autopilot. That's a
Yeah.
great it's a great ending. Oh man, thank you so much, Megan, for sharing all of your wisdom with astrology and sharing your path and story. I think it's super powerful, and yeah, it's just gonna, I think, help us just continue to be inspired to make those risky decisions that feel risky right now, but I swear from our experiences, it will be worth it, and just continue to trust. So thank you everyone for listening. And until then, I will see you in the next episode.
Thank you.